Today we're gonna dive into the source code of Silksong, one of the greatest games ever made and possibly a game of the year. And as you probably know, at first this game meant to be a DLC. However, at some point Team Cherry decided to make a separate game. That's why Silksong is literally built on top of Hollow Knight, and we can easily see that in the source code. Take for example rosaries, or the rosary beads, no matter how you call them, that's the main in-game currency. Well, technically they are still named Geo in the source code of Silksong. Like, you can literally see the functions named add Geo and take Geo. I guess at Farloom they use foreign currency. Long live Hollow Nest. Okay, so if we dig deeper into the source code, we can also find a function called getCurrencyCap that is responsible for the maximum amount of Geo or the rosaries that player can carry. And the limit is just under 10 million. Although you may notice it's a fallback in the code and the actual values are stored inside currency caps variable, but even if we run the game and print those values, we're still getting the same cap value. Apparently, you are not allowed to have 10 millions of rosaries in this game for whatever reason. However, the data type used to store rosaries in the source code is a default 32-bit signed integer in C# language. Thus it can hold numbers up to this value. And that's huge, let me tell you. My guess the limitation has something to do with the UI and the maximum amount of digits that can be displayed. One more interesting thing about currency is that in Silksong you can actually have a debt. Now, I don't know if that's intentional, but Hornet can have a negative amount of rosaries, and it will actually be correctly displayed on the UI as well. Now, it's funny because some guy on Reddit posted a meme where you should pay with a rosaries to actually launch the game, and I've told him that it can be implemented with the mods. Soon after, we were joking about Hornet being in a debt. Well, as you see, the game does have a debt mechanics, although I don't know if it's somehow used. So write down in the comments if you ever was in a rosaries debt. Overall, looking at the source code of the game, I can say the quality of the code in Silksong was heavily improved, especially in compare with the first Hollow Knight game. Let me tell you, those 7 years Team Cherry spent not only polishing the game itself, but polishing the code as well. And here are some examples. Let's look at how the save data works in both games. In Hollow Knight, there are tons of distinct sets of variables for controlling things like charms, hunter's journal entries, items, spells, etc. In Silksong, these are all arrays. Not only it looks better, but also considered a good practice in programming world. Map markers also have seen some love from Team Cherry, as they were pretty much hard-coded in the first Hollow Knight game. Basically, we had a list of arrays, list markers yellow, list markers blue, red and white. Thus it was causing map being corrupted when mods tried to increase map markers limit size, because those arrays were fixed size. And that's considered a bad practice, because you should never access an array's index that is out of bounds. In programming world, we call it an undefined behavior. That said, you won't always properly handle such cases, but in Hollow Knight, they never actually validated the out-of-bounds case. And I know this for sure, as I made plenty of mods for this game, including the mod that increased map markers limit. Now, in Silksong, it's coded way better, and here is the same function as a comparison. Not only it's smaller, but also it doesn't introduce described issue. Also, map marker types are now implemented through an enum called marker types. Way better implementation, if you ask me. And I could also show you how both games handles respawn logic, or the way both games handle scene transitions. By the way, it's much faster and optimized in Silksong, but I guess you already have an understanding of the overall significantly improved code in Silksong compared to Hollow Knight. Well done, Team Cherry.
Get down!
What I also want to share with you is some rough statistics on the source code. There are approximately 250,000 lines of code in Hollow Knight, compared to 485,000 lines of code in Silksong, and that's twice as much. Of course, it doesn't include blank lines and commands, as I used utility called clock to get this info, although it may include some third-party code as well as a bit blotted ILL decompilation overhead, so take it with a grain of salt. And if you're not into programming, you may ask if that's a lot for the game with this much content. Well, it depends. For an indie game, that's quite a lot. As a comparison, some time ago I've made a game in Unity with over 300,000 downloads on Play Market, and it had about 3,000 lines of code. And also, as one of the redditors, Izogesh, if I pronounced it right, mentioned in the comments, General Zero Hour has about 1.5 million lines of C++ code. Granted, that's including its own engine though. So to answer that question, that's a huge amount of code for an indie game, but not an unreasonable amount overall, again as Izogesh emphasized. That said, once again, take it with a grain of salt, although you should consider that the Silksong is built on top of the source code of the first Hollow Knight game. So probably, I guess it's 10 years of writing code for Silksong. Voila! And I also would like to express my gratitude to Team Cherry for allowing us to access the game's source code, as they didn't obfuscate the code and didn't use IL2CPP, thus allowing us to make mods much more easily for this awesome game. And I'm sure Team Cherry knows well how modding helps keep the game alive, and that's great. I only wish more game developers thought the same way. And with that being said, it wraps our video today. I hope you enjoyed it, and if so, consider subscribing to my YouTube channel and leave a like. Also feel free to ask any questions in the comments below. Have a great day and good luck at Farloom!